What is up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the SomeWhatSports Podcast. My name is Chris, and I'm joined by two of the world's finest. Yep, that's right, the world's finest, Jurg and Dame. Guys, how you doing this week?
I'm excited. I'm hyped. I'm amped up. We took a week off. The NFL draft stuff. It was massive. If those of you that maybe didn't get to check it out, you could still see where our thought processes were before the draft. So definitely check those videos out. But, we took a week off, and I'm excited to be back. I missed doing this on Thursday. My Thursday night was so boring last week.
Mm.
Mine was
Dame?
exciting.
Oh, yeah.
I'm kind of miserable to be back. I hate this weather. Nice and tan now. Came back here. Hoodie, sweats. It's disgusting, but it's been a good day actually. I actually got a PS5 finally. I got lucky on one of these Walmart links. But I'm also very happy about the draft, the way it turned out. I'm not gonna have any spoilers right now, but I'm very happy the way the draft went.
Yeah, I didn't know we were flexing our personal lives in this podcast. I guess we're doing that. But this is also the first podcast, the first fully vaccinated sports podcast
Oh
of
yes,
ours.
it is.
That's
It
right.
is.
All three of us are fully vaccinated. To kind of go off that, I hope everyone else, guys, get vaccinated, please. Let's not be dumb. Come on now. Let's put that aside. So we go into the sports world. Pretty, I would say, eventful weeks, because we haven't done this in I think a week and a half. A lot of shit has occurred, and we're gonna talk about those. And yes, when I say a lot of stuff has happened, that also includes the hockey world, right? And that also includes me not knowing essentially what has happened entirely to its fullest, but I just know the Rangers are involved and just violence and just anarchy and everything. But luckily, there is a hockey connoisseur in this team, and his name is Jurg. So Jurg, you're gonna, I guess, explain to me and Dame and the rest of the four listeners that usually watch our stuff what happened. And then we're gonna talk about the whole Aaron Rodgers dilemma, and then we're going to cap it off with our personal winners and losers of the 2021 NFL Draft, which we did a mock on that you could check out. Cheap plug. But anyway, yeah, so that's the rundown in order, and we're going to start off with the very best in the group. Jurg, please let me know the NHL updates. What happened? What's going on? Talk to me.
So very, very kind words. It's much appreciated. So I am here to restore some order of all the chaos that we've seen in hockey recently. And I will begin so with everyone's favorite time of year. The Stanley Cup playoffs are just around the corner, boys. We're just, I believe, a bit under 2 weeks or so, give or take. The reason why it is because obviously we go back to last month. The Vancouver Canucks had a whole COVID issue that caused them to miss a bunch of games. And so they're supposed to make them up. But the thing is that if the Montreal Canadiens are able to hang on to the fourth and final seed in the North Division, and they can mathematically eliminate both Vancouver and Calgary before those games come up, then I don't. Those games will not be played, from what I'm gathering. So potentially this season could go about like another week and a half or two. Potentially it could actually end within a little over a week. So that's a wait and see there. But for the most part, aside from the final spots in three of the divisions, everything else has been locked up in terms of teams. So over in the Central Division, the Carolina Hurricanes, the Tampa Bay Lightning, and the Florida Panthers have all locked in playoff spots. Tampa and Florida right now are fighting for the second seed. A little bit of a shot that they could get that first seed, but Carolina just is looking too good right now. And I believe they have a bit of an easier schedule compared to the other two. They are facing the Nashville Predators in their final two games, which, worth noting, Nashville is currently the fourth seed in the Central, 4 points ahead of Dallas. But Dallas has a game in hand because, remember, they had some COVID issues at the very start. So ultimately, Dallas has a chance here to sneak things away from Nashville if Nashville cannot secure a win in their last couple of games. So it's going to be interesting to see who makes it there. Will it be the Nashville team that everyone thought was dead in the water come the middle of the season, or will the defending Stanley Cup champions make it back to the playoffs and try to go for a run? Because Stanley Cup finalists, I should say, last year's Western Conference champion, the Dallas Stars. They could miss the playoffs, and that would be wild. So we'll see what happens there. In the East, all four spots have been clinched. The Capitals, the Penguins, the Boston Bruins, and the New York Islanders, all four of those teams have clinched. It's just all about finalizing seeding, which we will see over the next coming days. The Capitals have the advantage here. They have a game in hand over Pittsburgh, so a good chance that they clinch it. We'll obviously weigh on that. In the North, the, funny enough, largest division lead of any team up to this point still The Toronto Maple Leafs, they clinched a couple weeks back. Edmonton followed soon after. They're actually now the second seed in the North Division. And if things stay the same, it'll be them against the Winnipeg Jets, who just clinched last night. And as I alluded to earlier, the Montreal Canadiens have the fourth seed right now. And if they can, I think 1 or 2 more wins for them, or at least points, because you get a point in hockey for an overtime loss. I think 1 more point knocks out Calgary. I think a win and maybe an extra overtime or shootout loss would officially knock out Vancouver, or Vancouver just keeps losing, which they might. Vancouver actually faces Edmonton tonight, so we'll see on that. But odds are Montreal's probably going to be the 4th seed, and personally, Toronto Montreal is a first round matchup I want to see. You got 2 original 6 teams going at one another. That's something that's good for the sport, which we need more of that. I'll allude to certain things that have happened recently in a moment. And then over in the West Division, the Vegas Golden Knights, the Colorado Avalanche, and Minnesota Wild have clinched. Vegas is looking like they're likely going to wrap up the first seed. Colorado does have a game in hand against them, but Vegas has just looked so good recently in terms of how they've been playing. They're 8-2 in their last 10. They've just been beating teams left and right, and ultimately they look like the favorite to wrap it up and get the first seed, whereas Colorado and Minnesota are so far ahead of the 4th seed that they're most likely going to be the 2 versus 3 matchup in the West Division. And then for the 4th seed, I don't know why Arizona hasn't been eliminated. I think they should be mathematically eliminated, but at the moment, St. Louis Blues are ahead with 56 points. They have 5 games remaining, and I think all it takes is just 1 or 2 more wins will wrap it up for them. So St. Louis will likely be the 4th seed, and them against Vegas should be interesting. All it takes is a goalie in the playoffs, and St. Louis has had a goalie who's found success in the playoffs before, in Jordan Binnington, but at the same time, he's also struggled in the playoffs. He struggled last year when they got knocked out early when they were the defending Stanley Cup champions. And so this year he's been up and down, so we'll see what happens with them. But ultimately, the West is just about set, the North. So a couple divisions here. We're waiting for the final team and, of course, seeding. But we're about to get to the end of the finish line in terms of that point. And I'm really excited about that. The Stanley Cup playoffs are the best time of year for hockey. And ultimately, I think we're set for a good couple playoff matchups this year. I think Carolina against either Florida or Tampa in the second round will be nice. Washington and Pittsburgh has a chance to happen. That's a rivalry. Toronto versus Edmonton would be electric if we got that in the second round, because you have Matthews and Marner and Nylander and Tavares on the Maple Leafs against McDavid and Draisaitl. Those are 6 superstar forwards right there. So there you go. And then in the West, I want Vegas and Colorado. In a regular year, I would say that's the Western Conference Final. Because of the way the divisions are set up, they have to face each other in the second round at the latest, which kind of sucks. But at the same time, like, the two of them, it's just going to be an absolute bloodbath when they face off, and I'm excited for that. Like, the NHL has it set up to where there's going to be highly entertaining matchups coming in into those second rounds, and I'm very happy about that. I think that's good for the sport. For a sport that just within the last week or so, they negotiated their second TV contract. They negotiated and agreed to a deal with Turner. So it's all been good for the NHL. But up until the last couple of days, and Chris, I want you to lead everyone into it. Like, from what you know, like, essentially lead me into explaining to everyone, like, what the hell has happened the last few days, because it's been something extremely frustrating for me as a hockey fan.
Yeah. So this is what I know. I know that the Rangers complained about a certain player being extremely hostile, and after that, the request for ramifications, I guess, from the Rangers side, they were just like, "Yo, can we do something about this?" I think Dolan, because Dolan does own the Rangers as well, fired I'm assuming the manager,
the GM and
the GM
and the president. Yes.
Okay, he fired the GM and the president. So that's all I know from that perspective, and I know that from what I've seen from, like, people on Twitter, that wasn't a great move, to say the least, because, again, I don't know the context of this, but because the Rangers have been pretty good with their rebuild, and the fact that James Dolan fired the GM and the president because of, like, these type of because of their, I guess, requests for the league to take action on this violent act. I'm acting like it's a murder, but I'm just, this from what I'm hearing.
Well, it honestly it was
I don't know
close.
what happened. Okay, all right. So you're gonna tell us what happened. Yeah, so that's all I know. I know that it was very questionable to see those firings occur. That's all I know. Dame, do you know anything more than that, or do you even?
I have no idea. The only thing I saw on TikTok popped up,
Oh
and then
God.
the puck dropped, and everyone started coming
Yeah,
out. And
that's
started,
that again. That I also saw. Yeah, the beginning of that game, the puck dropped. Everyone took their helmets off. Boom.
yeah.
So here, have no fear, everyone. I am here to break down everything. So, in terms of the fights that you guys saw, that was yesterday's game between the Washington Capitals and the New York Rangers. But let's just take it a few days back. So this past Monday, the Washington Capitals defeated the New York Rangers. Ultimately, final score being 6-3. At some point within the middle of that contest, so here's the scenario: the Rangers shot a shot on goal against the Capitals, which was stopped. Well, ultimately stopped. Here was the thing: until the puck is blown dead, you're allowed to obviously go after the puck, and it's a common thing in hockey. It's kind of like an unwritten rule, quote unquote. You don't go after the other team's goalie in a hostile manner. Pavel Buchnevich, a player on the Rangers, was going after the puck. He in no way did it look like he made a violent play in any way towards the Capitals goalie. I believe it was Vanacek starting for them that game. So, but ultimately, a little bit of a skirmish occurs. Now, this is a common thing. Maybe someone gets on the ice, but ultimately nothing happens. Usually, it's fine. Here's where it doesn't go fine. And honestly, at some point, this may be the first time I curse in our podcast history because
Oh
this
God.
really frustrated me. But essentially, at some point, Tom Wilson, the player in question that you've been referring to, Chris, that started all this,
What team is he on?
he's on the Capitals.
Okay.
So at one point he is on top of Pavel Buchnevich. So Buchnevich at some point in the skirmish falls onto the ice and he is facing the ice with his face down. So he hit like laying down essentially, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Tom Wilson has his stick against like the upper part of his back/neck and throws two sucker punches to Buchnevich's face while he's down, while he's face down on the ice, while he's vulnerable. So Wilson does that against one of the Rangers players. What do the Rangers do? They didn't necessarily retaliate, which is something that a lot of old school hockey fans are saying they should have. I'm not going to touch on that aspect of this, but you go stick up for your guy. Artemi Panarin, a Rangers superstar forward, absolute great player, one of the notable names in the game, right? He hops on Wilson's back. I say hops on because Wilson's about like 6'4", 225, 230.
Okay.
Panarin's 5'11". He's not going there to instigate a fight. He's going there to get Wilson off his teammate, right? Like any good teammate in a sport would. So eventually, after that happens, Wilson shrugs Panarin off because he's like 45 pounds heavier, and they get tangled up. Now, this is common in hockey. If everything stopped there, this would not be a story, right? I think you know where I'm going. Wilson rips off Panarin's helmet
Oh.
and then grabs his hair and tries to slam him down on the ice. But he something happened. I don't know if he lost his grip or whatever. He wasn't able to properly slam down Panarin. And I don't just mean like he's falling with him. No, he was going to slam Panarin down on the ice. Panarin was going to go down head first.
Oh shit.
Tom, we were literally moments away from a player being knocked out on the ice, and not by a fight, not by a hit, but by someone being a complete and utter jackass on the ice. There is no excuse. This is the thing that's pissed me off. Capitals fans have been trying to excuse the actions of Tom Wilson. Capitals Twitter even made like a little meme or something about Wilson and what he did on Twitter, and they had to take it down because it received backlash. And normally I'm not for like the whole taking down a tweet thing if it wasn't ill intent, but that was one of the stupidest decisions that the Capitals social media guy could have made, because that was no laughing matter. If he had been properly thrown Panarin down, Panarin could have been killed. He
I'm
could
watching it
have
right
been-
now.
Right. He could have been killed. No, this is no laughing matter. He could have been killed. Ice is not soft. I know that may sound obvious, but ice is not soft. That ice needs to be durable enough where guys are constantly skating on it, falling on it, hitting on it. He could have been killed or minimum hospitalized with head issues. That is not a good look for the game, right? And so let me skip to this part of the situation. So a couple days later in the Wednesday game, like you guys alluded to, the second the puck goes, guys start fighting because the Rangers were not going to take that lying down. The fact that I don't know what injury was ultimately done to Panarin, but the Rangers decided to shut him and two other players down for their last couple games of the season, which I think they maybe would have done because they got eliminated from the playoffs with the loss anyway. But after seeing that, they were not going to risk putting their guys out there from an absolute buffoon potentially trying to body slam and kill them. And I'm not going to let off on that. Wilson could have seriously damaged Panarin, and I don't just mean for his career, I mean for his life. So again, the hockey fans that are trying to defend that, like, just straight up, I don't claim you. I do not claim you, because that's not real and that's not cool. That's garbage that people have been trying to defend Wilson. So a few days later, the fights break out. Just like an idea of how chippy and physical that game went, it was 4 fights within a 50-second span. It was about 6 fights, I think, in the first 4 or 5 minutes of the game. Ultimately, the two teams combined for 141 penalty minutes on the game, right? 141 between both of them. The Rangers took 85 and the Capitals took 56. I wish I knew if those were like records or not. They probably are. I just don't have it in front of me. But essentially, like, that's how the Rangers responded because, and now this is the main crux, this is why everyone is angry. The NHL Players Safety Association did the stupidest possible thing. They fined Tom Wilson for the hits on Buchnevich, for the penalty, because Wilson got assessed, I think, a major of some sort, and was he wasn't kicked out. He was just put in the penalty box because there's a picture of him again smiling like a jerk with his gear off. It's not cool. It's smarmy, right? So he's only fined $5,000 because of a rule that the NHLPA was able to negotiate in the last collective bargaining agreement. And man, what a bad time for me to say that was a bad decision, because honestly, I like what they did, but this was the worst possible time for that. So he only gets fined $5,000 for that, faces no repercussions for the fact that he body slammed another human being and tried to do it head first down on the ice. Like you said, Chris, the Rangers were pissed off. Straight from James Dolan, he released a statement saying that the Rangers feel that the head of the Player Safety Commission is unfit to do his job and should be removed immediately, because the head of the Safety Commission, George Peros, completely dropped the ball on this one. There is no 2 cents about it. You completely dropped the ball on the fact that a guy was mere inches away from potentially seriously harming a player on the ice. When we talk about, protect the shield, we mainly say that for the NFL. The thing with protecting the shield is that it's all about protecting the image of the league, right? In what way, shape, or form is allowing Wilson to play the immediate game against the Rangers good for the league? Because then you got what happened, right? You got everything that happened in this Rangers-Capitals game because the league was so stupid and they didn't suspend him. And I'm not one of these people calling for him to be banned or whatever, because I know ultimately at the end of the day, that was not going to happen, right? But at minimum, and see, this is common sense, right? Chris, we've spoken about this on the show. Dame, we've spoken about this. It's all about common sense. My problem is that the league did not have enough common sense to at least suspend him 1 or 2 games to finish off the series with the Rangers and move on from that. And like the stupidity, the pure idiocy that they weren't able to do that, just to another level. I got so frustrated. And like, as a hockey fan, it's just so disappointing. So ultimately, all the fights happen. He's not suspended. They're not going to suspend him after. And there's 2 different fallouts from everything that happened. Number one is the fact that a couple players have been suspended since this incident happened for things, for acts that were not as quote unquote heinous. Now that's not to say that those guys didn't deserve to be suspended. It's just that when you look at a boarding penalty gets a guy suspended, right? When a minor, a high sticking, a cross-checking penalty got Buchnevich suspended because he actually cross-checked the Capitals player in the following game that happened on Wednesday. I'm not saying they shouldn't have gotten suspended for what they did, but the fact that Wilson didn't get suspended, and again, it's all about the fact that you could have at least suspended him for that Rangers game so this wouldn't have happened. This was a completely avoidable situation if the NHL had grown a brain, right? And sadly, they didn't. So now this moves on to the Rangers portion of it. James Dolan and Chris and Dame, I know as long-suffering Knicks fans, you guys are going to be a little bit shocked by this, but James Dolan actually kind of did something it wasn't stupid of him to do at first. He was the one that wanted the statement released that the team believed that Peros was unfit for his job because he was stepping up for his superstar. And that's how you should step up for your superstar. So on that end, I'm actually happy what Dolan did. Now, here's the negative. The now former GM and presidents, Jeff Gorton, the GM, and John Davidson, the president, were ultimately fired by Dolan because they were trying to back away, saying that they had not approved the memo sent out by the Rangers and all of that, right? This is my one negative about this. And I'm saying this as a plea and as a demand. Dolan, get your hands off the Rangers now. You did the one good thing. You put out the statement. You wanted the statement out there denouncing the players' safety thing. And you know what? People may say that they shouldn't have done that because whatever. No, that was the right thing to do because Wilson was a complete and utter moron right there. A complete idiot. So the fact that Dolan had that happen, I'm actually cool with. Dolan, I can't believe I'm saying this. You did something right. But then he immediately screws it up and goes like 5 steps backwards by firing Davidson and Gordon. And people are trying to say that it's not because of that and it's because the Rangers rebuild hasn't gone their way. That is such garbage. No one expected them to beat Pittsburgh, Washington, the Islanders, and the Bruins in the division. No one expected that. The fact that with a week left or so in the season, week and a half, that they were actually still potentially had a chance at the playoffs is amazing. Like, this team still is on a rebuilding timeline. They were not a playoff caliber team this year. There was still growing to do, especially with some of the high draft picks they've had in recent years and how they've been performing. Like, this team has a future. That future was not now. So I personally do not believe, like, I'm just saying, like, in my opinion, I don't think that the quote unquote rebuild not being on track thing is solely it. That's what people are going to say. And maybe you would have won more in certain games this season. But I think ultimately Dolan did not like the fact that Davidson and Gorton were not there immediately supporting the statement. That's just my personal opinion. I'm not reporting that. I'm not saying it. I'm just saying I can connect the dots because that's who Dolan is. Again, I have 2 Knicks fans that can say it for me, right? Like, come on now. So ultimately, that was the whole situation. Do I agree with the firings? I ultimately don't. John Davidson has always wanted to be a part of the Rangers organization. He played for them as a player. He was actually their former color guy on their home games, right? Like, this is a guy that's been around the Rangers his entire professional hockey career. And it really sucks to see him go because he wanted to be the president so badly for that team. And Jeff Gordon, he built up a lot of this current Rangers rebuilding. Now, was he perfect? No. But how many GMs can you say are perfect, right? So ultimately, I think the two of them, it was wrong for them to be fired. But in terms of how the Rangers reacted, this is what happens when you don't step up. And the NHL did not step up big time. And I'm a hockey fan. I have sung the praises of what the NHL has done. I've defended them for things that weren't perfect this season. I'm not defending this. This was stupid. This was useless. This all could have been avoided. This is why sometimes the NHL, like, when people look at it, this is why I only praise the playoff games, because sometimes what they do behind the scenes, it just pisses me off, and this is one of those occurrences.
Whew. God damn. I don't know much else to say about it, but I mean, the thing is, I know that, like, I know the Knicks have always caught a lot of flack because of Dolan's, like, mishaps. Like, the Rangers have always been praised for just, like, being the more competent New York team, like the other sport that James Dolan owned. So it was very surprising to see this. I know it's bad publicity, but it is publicity for the NHL. Like, this got like actual media attention, Jurg. So, like,
Yeah.
I mean, I would kind of like cap off the topic with this question because I think you just kind of like said everything, you explained everything. Even though it's bad publicity, do you think the notoriety is maybe kind of good for the sport? Like, do you see any pros with this, even though it comes at like the worst context possible?
I mean, maybe now people are really going to pay attention to what's going to happen with the Capitals going forward, because I think a lot of people are going to like have Tom Wilson on their hit list of like, okay, this guy does one stupid thing, we're going
But
to
he's
send
done a bunch,
our
bro. I'm
biggest
seeing
guy.
his
So.
I'm looking at his Wikipedia page. He's gotten like in trouble several times from what
Yeah,
I'm
he's been
reading.
suspended 5 times. He was already suspended this season. Like, this is the big crux of everything. He's a repeat offender. How do you just fine him for the punches? Are you going to ignore the fact that he body slammed a guy after the play was blown dead, mind you, and with Panarin's helmet off? And Panarin is one of the superstars in this league, and they don't defend him. Like, that is the part that just, like, none of this makes sense for why the NHL did not punish him for that. You cannot look at it any way. He did it to a superstar. The play was dead. Panarin's helmet was off. This is a repeat offender who already has been suspended this season. Just none of this adds up. And if I may, just really fast to your point about Dolan and the Rangers, he's never been hands-on with them. He's always been more hands-on with the Knicks. That's why it all makes sense, right? Like that. That's why that the Rangers have been so good. They've allowed the hockey men to do their thing. It's why if you look at Buffalo, for example, why have the Bills been so good in recent years and the Sabres have been just hot garbage is because the owners, the Pagula family, they've allowed the Bills to do their thing the last few years, and look what they've become, a Super Bowl contender. They have been so hands-on with the Sabres, they even mess up alumni nights and get like knockoff jerseys for the team alumni to wear. It's that bad when your owner gets that much of an ego. So just want to clarify the whole thing with Dolan. Like, and again, the only thing I say he did good, the statement I agree with. They should denounce it because Peros dropped the ball on this one by a mile, and yeah, that's just what I think. It was just just avoidable and stupid all around. And I'm not going to say anyone is blameless except for Tom Wilson. He could kick rocks.
I'm pretty surprised that this hostile nature is of him because it says he is Canadian, so I'm surprised at that. Well, I mean, this is probably the longest segment we've ever had for hockey, and I'd say it did not disappoint in the slightest. Yeah, shout out to Jurg for clarifying everything and just putting everything into perspective. All right, so moving on from a disgruntled Jurg to another disgruntled goat. Aaron Rodgers, surprise, surprise, is disgruntled with the Green Bay Packers. That's right, Adam Schefter revealed on draft night, surprisingly, that Aaron Rodgers is, I guess, what's new, that he's upset with the organization for, I mean, things that have already been known for a while that we're probably going to bring up in this upcoming minute or so. But yeah, he's told teammates and he's told, I think, other free agents that he doesn't expect to be back with the Green Bay Packers. And I think it's Aaron Rodgers, and this has been occurring for a while now. His kind of like unhappiness with the Green Bay Packers. I mean, it's been happening for a while, but there was, of course, trade rumblings during draft night as well, and there was a bunch of teams that were rumored. But this looks like a situation that may be a little bit too dire. Uh, they made a few selections on draft night, but I think they didn't like with their first round pick. They did not go the route that we thought they should have. They never go the route that we think they should have, and I think Aaron Rodgers has had it. I know the Broncos have been rumored to be the team that trades for Aaron Rodgers. I know that the Niners were. I don't think the Niners are there anymore. I think they kind of just went through with Trey Lance at this point. I don't even think the Niners have the assets to make the trade for Aaron Rodgers. But I feel like a trade with Aaron Rodgers is ultimately inevitable, in my honest opinion. You guys know more about it. I would like to get your thoughts on this. Dame, what's your whole opinion on the whole Aaron Rodgers Green Bay fiasco?
Man, I'm not surprised. Like, he's had enough, but like, I also think this is gonna end up just like Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson did. I don't think he's gonna be traded. He honestly took too long. If this is how he felt, he should have said it from the beginning of the offseason. This report, he should have like leaked the report, or someone in this camp should have leaked the report way before the draft. Because if you're gonna leak it the day of the draft, like, there's not enough time for teams to negotiate and talk different kind of deals in order to move him. Like, teams already know who they're selecting. They know how their draft strategy is. Like, there's not enough time to deal these draft picks for him because obviously in football, a lot of these big time trades involve draft picks. So I'm not surprised with the way he feels, but I'm also not surprised that the Packers aren't going to trade him. He's still in the contract. He just signed a contract. He came off MVP year. They're in the NFC Championship. Like, why would the Packers want to trade him? On Aaron Rodgers' side, like, he came out with this. Maybe he didn't even want to get traded. He just wanted to put pressure on them for the draft. But honestly, it didn't work because, once again, they did not draft a wide receiver in the first round. Instead, they went with a cornerback. So I see both sides, but at the end of the day, I think the resolution on both sides is going to be that he's going to stay. Whether he sits out and just doesn't play is going to be up to him, but I don't think he's going to be traded at the end of the day.
So just the whole situation, like kind of what Dame said, and what you said, Chris, like this has been building up. This isn't just recent years. This isn't even just what happened with Jordan Love last year. This has been a continuing process of this team has never properly invested in Rodgers and believed in him like any other organization has their starting quarterback. When you look at things in New England, while Brady has said that looking back, things weren't always great with Belichick, and we'll obviously see in more detail, you know for a fact if Brady spoke up and did say something internally, it mattered. in Indianapolis, and eventually when he was in Denver. If Peyton Manning did not want you on the team, you were not going to be on the team. Like, that is a 100% fact. Peyton Manning, the sheriff, ultimately said, like, hey, if you can't catch for me, get the hell off the team. Like, there are literally stories of if a guy messed up on a play, Peyton would kick him off the field, like, on for a play, and the coaching staff would tell him, get back on. And he would try to get back on, and Peyton was like, no, 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 no. Get the hell off. I'm running this. You're not on the field right now. Like, that's what other teams have done. And I'm sure even if you look at other pretty good quarterbacks, Ben Roethlisberger, how long has he controlled the Steelers? Up until recently, their offensive coordinator, Fichtner, was essentially Ben's puppet. At this age, when he's been nowhere near as good as Rodgers the last few years, they have never given him the feel of who he is. And that is the quarterback for this franchise, the guy that has carried them up. And I think ultimately, because if you look at the article that was initially released, it's not from Rodgers' perspective. That's from the Packers' perspective. They were putting this out as a way to try to garner, the story of, okay, Rodgers is just, throwing one of his superstar hissy fits, da da da. It really backfired on them because a lot of people, that even some people I personally know that aren't the biggest Rodgers fans, even they're like, come on, how are you screwing it up this badly with him? So ultimately, like, I've always believed in you reap what you sow, and this organization has done that for a long time. I'm saying this right now, in the organization, they believe that they're the reason they've been as good as they've been for the last 2 decades. Nothing to do with the fact that 2 Hall of Famers have started at quarterback for the last 30 or so years for them. I'm telling you right now, if you're a Packers fan, you should be worried, because the second Rodgers leaves, it's going to all go downhill for this team. And Jordan Love ain't doing a thing in the world to try to get you. You've been 13-3 the last few years, 12-4, whatever. You're going to be like 4-13 when he leaves, because that's how much he carries them up, right? So that's how I feel on it. Like, will he get traded? I don't know, because I think he said he wants to retire a Packer, and I do believe him when he says that. But at the same time, like, you guys understand this. When you deal with just stupidity day after day, month after month, you get so sick and tired of it. It's like, okay, I just want to leave this place. Like, I'm done with this. I don't want to be here anymore. So that's the way I see it. Will he get traded? I don't know. But should he? 100%. Get him off that team. They don't deserve him anymore. That organization doesn't deserve him.
I agree that they don't deserve him. Yeah, I mean, like, this has been, again, we've kind of talked about this before. I don't know if it's been on the podcast, but I mean, we would be beating a dead horse saying that, like, they don't deserve Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers should leave. Should he leave, though? Which team do you guys see trading for him? Is it the Broncos, like it's heavily rumored, or do you think there's like a team that is lurking in the shadows that has the assets to pull this trade off? Dame, what do you think?
I think it's between 3 teams. Broncos, obviously. The Raiders were rumored. I also think the
Mm-hmm.
Giants are a good fit. Because it is New York, and obviously Aaron Rodgers is kind of guy that likes a spotlight. Like, no one's gonna deny that. So coming to New York, whether the Packers believe in Jordan Love or not, you can send Daniel Jones there. All these draft picks. But if I had to pick one for the best situation for him to win, I think it would be the Broncos. Although it is kind of difficult because Patrick Mahomes is in that division, but a report did come out from Aaron Rodgers' camp that he would actually welcome that kind of competition and that he would want to face Mahomes 2 times a year to show that he's better than him. So I kind of, if that's true, like, I really like that coming from Aaron Rodgers. So I do think if he goes to the Broncos, that'd probably be the best position for him to win because they do have a comparable offense around him. Who knows what the Raiders are doing, and same with the Giants.
Ultimately, yeah, I'm kind of with Dame there. I think if you're just going based off of one of those 3 teams, then you want to go with the Broncos, because then my thing is that just look at the weapons first off. He's coming into Melvin Gordon the third being his top running back, and they just drafted a kid. I think it was their 2nd round pick, if I'm not mistaken, a running back out of UNC. In the again 2nd or 3rd round, I forget, but I think it was the 2nd round.
Second.
Yeah. So you got those 2. And then at the wide receiving core, you got Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick, who finished off their seasons. Noah Fant is a solid tight end. KJ Hamler is a good depth option, and he wasn't healthy this year. A lot of people forget. Cortland Sutton is a number 1 caliber receiver.
Stud.
See, he's really good. So Rodgers, if he leaves Green Bay, leave Devontae Adams. The thing is, Cortland Sutton is there for you in Denver. And by the way, let's not rule out the possibility. Devontae Adams only has a year left on his contract, so if Rodgers leaves, Devontae's gone after a year. Let's keep it real. Devontae Adams and some of those guys stay there because Aaron Rodgers is there, because they all understand, hey, this guy makes us look a lot better when he's here. Like, everyone knows that. You can think you're as good as you can be. It's a simple fact. When a GOAT is working with you, you just work better. That's why I work so good with Chris and Dame, because they're amazing. So, like, it's just that simple, right? So again, to Dame's point, they have the weapons there, and then defensively, they're trying to build something. You still have Bradley Chubb on the defensive line. Von Miller is going to be back. The linebacking core is the only thing I would question. Like that, that's my only concern. But then look at the defensive backfield there. It's Justin Simmons. It's I think Casey Hayward was the former Charger that they signed this past offseason. They picked up Fuller. They drafted Surtain. Like, this Broncos defense could be dangerous next year. Now, my only concern is Vic Fangio's the coach. I don't think he's that great of a coach. But hey, Aaron Rodgers carried Mike McCarthy for what, a decade? Like, I'm sure he could do that with Fangio to like a good 11 wins or so. And 11 wins would be good enough for a wild card spot at least.
By the way, Jurg, that compliment to me and Dame, it didn't go unnoticed. Thanks.
Thank you. We got to also remember with the Broncos, like John Elway runs that organization. You got to remember what he did with Peyton Manning when he came there for the last few years of the season. Like, he did everything possible to put the right team around Peyton Manning for him to be successful. And he came out with 2 Super Bowl appearances and 1 Super Bowl win. So I wouldn't doubt that if Aaron Rodgers went there, it'd be the same exact thing. John Elway would put the best team possible around Aaron Rodgers to make the Super Bowl and win as many Super Bowls as he possibly can.
Right. Well, technically he's not the executive, but I'm sure he would pressure
He's
whoever
the
the
president.
current GM.
He was the GM, and then he gave up that position to move to president, and he's whatever.
Right.
But at the end of
Yeah,
the day,
I think,
he has the last
but
decision.
I think to your point, like, he would pressure the GM, like, hey, like we did this with Peyton, like, kind of try to do the same thing here with Aaron, like, you know.
It wouldn't be like the Packers where they needed a receiver and they wouldn't draft one. Like, he would go draft one if they needed a receiver or something like that.
You're right about that.
All right. Okay. So we're all in consensus that the Packers suck in his organization and that Rodgers should be out. I mean, they don't know how to treat him well. They don't know how to treat a god well. But yeah, any final comments on it before we move on to our main event?
I'm just happy that, like, my thing is, like, people are going to try to paint the negative on Rodgers. Like, the most direct thing we've heard from him is that he's upset that this got public because he actually wanted to handle this internally. So again, if you're trying to point everything at Rodgers, you're pointing to the wrong thing, because he's not the one that made this public. Again, reread with context clues that article Schefter put out. That was clearly from the Packers side of everything. They wanted to try to make this a mess and put negative PR on Rodgers. Didn't really work out too well for them, which I'm not surprised. An organization that can't figure out back-to-back first-round picks, I'm not shocked they can't even put out like a information properly either. So, like, who's to say we should be shocked by that?
Yep.
All right. Okay. And now we move on to the main event, which is our winners and losers of the 2021 NFL Draft that occurred last Thursday. Fellas, so I'll go first for the winners, and then you guys could, I guess, rebound off me because y'all know more. So obviously we're going to start off with the winners, and then we'll end off with the losers. Now, for me, my first winner, I think we all have this, and it's probably in Dame's list, but the New York Jets as a big winner. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Joe Douglas, and the Jets hit a grand slam, as I'm sure Damien is hyped about, especially after the whole Joey Douglas slander that we had a couple podcast episodes ago. But he redeems his off-season shenanigans with just a phenomenal draft. That's right. So I think everyone knew we were going to go Zach Wilson with quarterback. We have our quarterback for the future. And, I think this time is different because I think obviously Zach Wilson's more talented than Sam Darnold. You could say you could think what you think. I think this. And we, of course, we move up in the draft to get Elijah Vera Tucker. That's right. Offensive tackle, I believe, from USC. Jurg, am I right?
Yep.
Okay. So we get Zach Wilson protection, and I think Elijah Vera Tucker was one of the best offensive tackles in the draft, so we kind of move up to get him, and I love it. I think a lot of people said we gave up too much, which I understand, but also we have a lot of draft capital next season, so I think we could afford to make that move. And again, this is like we all know offensive line has become the thing to just kind of, structure. I'm just happy that the Jets got Vera Tucker. And there was rumors that like the Jets were preparing to make a move like that. Should a guy that they're interested in be available, and that's exactly what they did. And then, of course, I think one of the biggest deals in the draft, they get Elijah Moore in the second round. That's right, with the 34th pick, they get Elijah Moore, and I'm happy because I think he has first round potential. He slides to the second round. The Jets snag him. They give Zach Wilson another weapon. I think this adds on to a wide receiver core that we thought was improved, was good with the addition of Corey Davis, with the emergence with Denzel Mims. They needed a little. They needed one more, and I think Zach Wilson was hyped too, based on his tweets. So yeah, we got Elijah Moore. Those are the most notable selections they made in the draft. In the later rounds, they addressed running back Michael Carter, and they also, I think, drafted 3 cornerbacks. Name is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So cornerbacks, they were obviously lacking in that department heavy. So I think they just stacked up on that position in the later rounds. And again, we don't, obviously, you never know who could pop off, but I'm just glad that they kind of loaded on that because they're really dry in that department. But other than that, I'd say that they nailed their first 3 picks out the park easily. That's my first winner. So what do you guys think about the Jets being considered a winner in this draft, Dame?
It's been a really really long time since the Jets been considered a winner in the NFL draft. They've been one of the worst drafting teams ever, honestly. So to have him seen as a winner is very exciting. Obviously, Zach Wilson. The biggest thing to me was Tucker and Moore. Obviously, with Tucker, he played guard in college, but he's going to move on the inside to NFL. I honestly see kind of a Zach Martin kind of transition with him, where he played tackle in college, but he was better suited for guard in the NFL, and he turned into all-pro guard, one of the best guards in the NFL. I see that kind of projection for Tucker. So I think him and Mekhi Becton, whether he plays on the left side or right side, regardless, those two are going to be anchors that offensive line to protect Zach Wilson. And thing with Elijah Moore, it's not that he was a steal. It's just we added a different kind of elements to his wide receiver group. With Corey
Mm-hmm.
Davis, you kind of have that big guy, that kind of go get it guy. Crowder, he's your slot guy. Denzel Mims is kind of your like gadget kind of guy. He can go get but he's not that fast. But with Elijah Moore, you add speed. That's something this Jets offense really lacked the past couple seasons. I went into this on a previous podcast when I talked about free agency and how the Jets didn't target any speed in free agency. But now they adding Elijah Moore, who runs like a 4.3 or something like that, a really low 4.3. It's gonna extremely explosive playmaker to add to Zach Wilson. You don't gotta throw. He could go get it deep, but you could throw him a screen and he could go 75 yards with it. He probably could help in special teams as well. So overall, just a great draft for the Jets to keep it short, and I'm extremely happy because I haven't been able to say that since honestly I was a Jets fan.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a W for you guys. I think to your point, like the Jets, while they may have like 1 or 2 decent picks here and there, like you can't always say they've won a draft via multiple picks. I think obviously Wilson, we figured he was going to be their guy. So what were they going to do after that? And their first 2 picks after drafting Zach Wilson, they got a guy who played left tackle at college, but like Dame said, that was more out of need for USC. He's going to slot back into the guard spot in the NFL. I think he's going to be very good. He would not have been there if they had stayed packed at 23. So that's why it was a big move for them. And ultimately, the thing with that was they didn't give up, like, to my knowledge, my memory, they
Oh
didn't give up
yeah,
a first or a
that's what I
second in
forgot to
that trade.
mention.
You give up
Yeah.
a bunch of thirds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I
So
forgot to mention. Let me just go and look. Like you
mhm.
just saw a couple picks before that. You saw the Bears move up with the Giants, and they had to give up a first, a third, and a fourth, or something like that. Maybe additional like 6 or something like that. So when I saw a Jets trade, I'm like, damn. Like I hope they don't give up an extra first round pick next year, or even a 34th pick, which is pretty valuable. It's like honestly an extra late first rounder. So I was kind of scared they were gonna give that up, and then boom, out of nowhere you have 2/3. I'm like, oh my god, that's crazy because one of them was a Seahawks pick, so. Regardless, we gave up 2 third-round picks to move up 9 spots. When the Bears 2 picks before gave up a first-round pick plus a third plus a fourth to move up 7. So that the trade up value to me was an absolute win. I don't know how people saw it as an overpay.
Yeah. So it was an absolute W for the Jets because he wouldn't have been there. Like, that's the thing people don't understand. He would not have been there come 22, 23, whatever the Jets' original pick was. So ultimately, banger move right there. And Elijah Moore, a pretty good receiver. Just, again, in today's NFL, you need to add weapons properly. A receiver in the first 3 rounds, especially the first 2, if he's good, is something you need to consider to just add a weapon for your QB. And Elijah Moore could be a guy. He's not going to have high expectations in right away. He's going to learn from these veterans. He's going to make some plays here and there. It's a W for the Jets after that. And if any of these later round picks hit, like if they become at least reliable, like this was just the W of a draft all around.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. So going to my final winner, I'm gonna go with the Los Angeles Chargers. Yes, I think the Chargers win this draft. Well, they are a winner of this draft. Because I think they tackle a bunch of needs. I'm very surprised he kind of dropped to them. Rashawn Slater drops them, and I think their biggest need was offensive line. So they get, I think, one of the best offensive tackles in the draft, Rashawn Slater, who I guess was kind of in their range. Like I think he was more like 8 to 11 ish. But he was there for the Chargers, and they give Justin Herbert some much needed help because I think that was like a big problem with them last season. So that was huge. They get one of the best offensive linemen, so props to them. They get Asante Samuel with cornerback, I think, with their second round, I believe. Yeah, and again, Josh Palmer, wide receiver, I think third round, which I think is an underrated move. I think a lot of people are praising this selection because he's apparently one of the more underrated names in this draft. And then I think they get another tight end, Trey McKitty, Nick Neiman, the left back, and then Larry Roundtree, the third at running back. So I just think they gave Justin Herbert a bunch of help in terms of just weapons, and then they just beefed up the offensive line with Rashawn Slater kind of leading that. So props to them. I think you protect your superstar quarterback, who I think everyone agrees with that he's gonna be a flat out baller in the future, and you give him more weapons. So I think the Chargers surpassed expectations last year, and I think a lot of that has to do with Herbert being better than everyone projected him to be. So I think the Chargers are going to be one of those scary teams to look out for. They're going to be very sneaky this upcoming season. I think in a couple of years they're going to be really good. So that's what I think. I think the Chargers are in my list in terms of just winning this draft. What do you guys think? Jurg, I'll start off with you.
Oh yeah, the fact that Slater dropped to them, like he's a guy you could put at a couple different positions on that offensive line. He's going to be good for them. So that was a great pick. And then like you said, it's all about the depth picks. And Asante Samuel Jr., who that Chargers defensive back crew, like there were some pretty good players there a couple years ago. They traded off a few of those guys, so now they got to kind of rebuild / retool it. And that's a good piece to start off with. And ultimately, like think about it, Justin Herbert was thrown to like 4th-string receivers last year. So if the rookie receiver and tight end that they've drafted, if those guys could just be, especially because Hunter Henry left, so maybe McKitty, like if he performs well early on, could earn himself the starting tight end role. Like this has a chance to be a pretty good draft class for the Chargers. And ultimately, it was all around the fact of we're going to help out our young quarterback, and we're going to do right by him. Like just imagine that. Imagine a team doing right by their franchise quarterback. Isn't that something?
Dame?
And there's nothing else to say. You guys said it all. They got their offense. They got arguably some analysts who could be the best offensive lineman in this class, playing my guard or tackle wherever you need him. And with Asante Samuel, like his dad played in NFL, so he has that NFL blood in him. And usually these players pan out. So adding him to that defensive backfield after they lost Casey Hayward Jr., like it can't say anything else besides a win for the Chargers. So you took two of my winners, of course, not surprised.
Nice.
Let's go with my third winner. I'm gonna go with the Ravens.
Nice.
For 3 reasons. Well, 2 reasons, but 3 players. They went and got their quarterback, a number 1 receiver. Something I can't say about another team. In this draft that kind of picked around this kind of pick. Rashad Bateman went to the Ravens. I did not expect him to be there at their pick. I thought he was going to be picked a lot earlier. But for him to be there for the Ravens, and thank God they picked him because he's going to be an absolute weapon for that team. He can run every route on the route tree. He could go get the ball. His catch rate is very high. He's very quick. His hands are great. It's an all-around great receiver for Lamar Jackson and something he's been lacking ever since he came into NFL. Then you added Wallace from Oklahoma State in the 3rd round or 4th round, I believe. That's another great pick, another player to add to our wide receiver core, which is absolutely depleted. And in the 5th round, they added Shaun Wade, the cornerback from Ohio State. Shaun Wade, before the season, or really in the beginning of the collegiate season, he was ranked as a first-round kind of player. And then he kind of struggled throughout the season. He kind of dropped off. But to add Sean Wade to that cornerback room, which includes Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphrey, and Jimmy Smith. Like adding him as a fourth cornerback to really, he's gonna learn behind these great talented cornerbacks. Like that might really help him because the potential's there, the talent is there. He just kind of fell off the season. So adding him to that cornerback room is an absolute steal for me in the 5th round. Overall, the Ravens did what they needed to do. They added their receivers. They got a big potential kind of guy in Sean Wade in the 5th round. So I see him as a winner in this draft.
Yeah, quick to rebound off Damien's analysis. Yeah, I did not think Rashad Bateman would be there, but I'm glad. Like, this gives a generally weak wide receiver core, that's the Baltimore Ravens, a much needed boost, and it gives Lamar Jackson a weapon. So I think instead of just like they're predominantly a running team, so I think Bateman kind of just gives them more of a dynamic. And yeah, I'm glad that they took him. You know, I was very afraid that if he wasn't there, because I remember like when he dropped, I'm like, oh, the Ravens would hit a home run if they just picked him right here. It'd be an absolute steal. And you know, of course, they did it. And like Jurgen said, you know, you you surround your quarterback with young pieces, with pieces like that, with extra weapons, especially a weapon that you desperately need. And they did that. And so I think that was a huge one. Yeah, the Ravens, if I didn't say, they were definitely in my winners list too. Jurg.
Oh yeah, the fact that Bateman was there, I'm kind of surprised too. I would have thought, in our mock, shout out to that, Bateman was picked by Tennessee if I'm not mistaken. So like the fact that he went a couple more spots down to Baltimore was nice. I also think like you guys mentioned a lot of the picks, but they also picked two guys like with their second first. They got the Owe kid from Penn State, and then Ben Cleveland later on.
Oh
Like
yeah,
just adding to the trenches on both sides is big. Ben Cleveland is a physical specimen that like if
he's
they can mold,
huge. Oh my god,
he could be their Orlando Brown Jr. replacement if he can transition over to right tackle. And then Owe just like he's one of these late first round edge rushers where it's like he has some gifts, he has some talent. If they can make something out of him, like this could be a very good draft for Baltimore, even aside from the two receivers they picked up.
And Dame, your final winner.
So my final winner is going to be the New York Giants. Um, they originally had the 11th pick, but they traded back with the Bears, of course, like I mentioned, and they got Tooney out of Florida, the slot receiver. I think it's a very good addition to their wide receiver core because they added Kenny Galladay, and then you have Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton, who honestly have been inconsistent, but Tooney adds this different kind of elements to that offense. He can run any route in that slot. He's extremely fast. He has great hands. So he's really that kind of gadget guy that could do everything, and he's gonna add a different element alongside Kenny Galladay. So gives him kind of different look. And then in the second round they got I can't even say his guy's name, Ujulari from Georgia, who many had as a first round pick and
Steal.
maybe the best pass rusher in the draft, and he got him all the way in the second round. Obviously, as a Jets fan, I'm pretty upset because I don't want the Giants to be good, but can't give nothing but credit to them. And then in the third round, they got Aaron Robinson, the cornerback out of UCF, who many thought could be an early second round pick because he was a high riser and out of all the cornerbacks. So adding a wide receiver, a pass rusher, and a cornerback to a cornerback room that's already stacked is really good for them. And not to mention, they added the Bears' first round pick next year, which honestly, the Bears always suck, so it's going to be a great first round pick. Overall, just the players they picked and the picks they received for trading back, I think it's a win for the Giants.
No, yeah, obviously, I think that trade in the first round overall is good for them because you get that extra pick next year to just load up in a draft class where maybe you keep attacking needs, maybe a new need pops up come next year, like all these different things that ultimately you could do with two firsts, and I think that's a big win for the Giants there. And then Ojulari, like he's a guy that I really like coming out of this draft class. Him and Koromoa were like the top two guys that I viewed as first round caliber talents, where it's like, okay, you could put them at different spots on the defense and like they could do something. Again, I think ultimately like you got to find the one spot, but he's just so talented. And with the Giants defense, with Joe Judge there, like the culture he brings, I think ultimately like that's the kind of guy that can make a difference for you if used right. And just me personally, like I'm not the biggest fan of the Kadarius Toney pick, as for the fact that I had a couple teams that I could have gone receiver with in our mock a couple weeks back, and I didn't for a reason because I'm just personally not a big fan of him. But like, if it becomes something, it becomes something. That's my perspective with him. Like if he does, he does. If he doesn't, he doesn't. Like it could help Daniel Jones because I think they're going to move on from one of those veterans. Well, mainly Sterling Shepard next season, and if that's what's likely going to happen, Shepard eventually out, Tony in. So it makes sense. But now moving on to my two winners that I have, and I'll run through the both of them very, very quickly. The first off, I'm going to go with, ironically talking about them earlier, the Denver Broncos. I think overall it was actually a pretty solid draft class for what Denver had in terms of the picks. Patrick Surtain the second, like we did not expect them to go with defensive back. I think we all expected them, myself, because I think I had their pick. I went with Micah Parsons for them, but obviously they decided to go with the cornerback field because they did need a few more corners. So Surtain the second was a massive pickup there, arguably the best corner in this draft. Him and J.C. Horn went back to back, and that screwed up what the Cowboys did. Javonte Williams in the second round, very great. I've heard a lot of people say that despite the hype behind ETN and Najee Harris, a lot of people think Javonte Williams could become the premier running back from this draft class. So that just lets you know they picked up a really talented guy there. And then after that, just solid picks followed. Quinn Miernes is an interior O lineman that could be pretty good for them. He's one of these like Division 2/Division 3. I think Wisconsin Whitewater is a D3 if I'm not mistaken. But he's one of these guys that could find success in the NFL. Like you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers O line last year. A couple of those guys were D2, D3 guys. So you got to believe they picked him for a reason there in round 3. And then a couple defensive players in these mid rounds. Caden Stearns from Texas, Baron Browning from Ohio State. Jamar Johnson's a guy that I'm really interested to see what they could do with because I think he could be a help right away. Maybe if he can fit alongside Justin Simmons on the safety group like that would be massive if you hit on a 164th. So I think that's what 5th, 6th round name if I'm not mistaken. Like if you could get an instant starter out of a 5th, 6th round pick potentially, or a backup who sees a lot of playing time, that's a W. So that's why Denver's my first winner. My second winner really fast is the Washington football team, just based off of their first couple of picks. While a lot of people may view it as an overdraft, Jamin Davis is a guy that I really fell in love with. I strongly considered him at the Packers pick in our mock a couple weeks ago. I've literally believed that if he was one of the guys on the board, he's one of the few players I would have considered taking over a wide receiver if you were Green Bay. Obviously, that didn't happen because Washington picked him up a lot earlier than expected. I file that pick under if you see your guy and you want to get him. And I think you could argue it could end up well because he's a good linebacker. He could drop back in pass coverage. He could help with on the run a little bit. Like he could do it all. He can tackle. I think that's an underrated thing in the NFL. Like finishing your tackles is something I think is becoming a bit of a lost art, kind of like the mid-range in the NBA. Like remember last year, Dame, like the Jaguars first round corner, like if I'm not mistaken, wasn't there at least a rumor that said he's not the biggest fan of tackling? Like, dude, that's literally your job on defense. So so Jamin Davis I think was a great pick. Then they got Cosme, one of the tackles in the second round. In any other draft that wasn't as stacked on the offensive line side of things, he would have been a first round pick. So the fact they got him in round 2 to slot at either left or right tackle is massive. And then Diami Brown at wide receiver, back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving seasons to finish off his career, 20 total touchdowns caught the last 2 seasons. He's a stud. Again, he's another one of these late guys that a lot of people are saying he could end up being like a top 5 receiver from this draft class. You got a top 5 receiver in a draft class in the 3rd round, that's a W. So myself personally, even though Washington only made the playoffs last year because the NFC East and Denver didn't make it, I think those two teams had very good draft classes for themselves. That these players, a few of them could make impact right away. A few of them it may take a year or two to see if they become something. But like their main guys they drafted, I think they hit on them.
Yeah, Washington I think had a really good draft because their first round pick, I actually thought they were going to go offensive lineman. I thought they could have went Cosme, and they got him in the second round, which is a steal. But with Davis, You add to your defense, which was already on arguably the best in the league. You added to the only spot that you have a weakness in, the linebacker position. And you add Cosme in the second round to be your right or left tackle, whether it's this year or next year, whether he needs to be groomed or not. And then the wide receiver they got from UNC. You just complete your wide receiver group with Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin. So he's a great compliment to those guys. With the Broncos, actually, I had them as a loser in this draft, but
really?
It's not because of the picks they made after first round. It's solely based on their first round pick.
Mm-hmm.
at 9. They're sitting there at 9, and they already have cornerbacks in their backfield. And you don't. The one thing that you do need is a quarterback. And you have Justin Fields sitting right there in your lap. Like many thought he was going to go top 4, top 5, or the team was going to trade up to like 7 or something to draft him. And you're there at 9, and he's sitting there, and you don't take him. Instead, you take a cornerback, which you already have a couple of. So that's the reason why I had them as a loser. But the rest of the draft I really liked is just the first round pick. I think they really messed up by not taking Justin Fields because now you're stuck with Drew Lock, who honestly to me has his limitations.
Well, also they did trade for Teddy Bridgewater, but I understand what you're saying. Like you had the chance for the young quarterback there that
Yep.
going into this draft for the longest time, he was the second guy before recently. Like I can understand that. I mean, yeah, ultimately I can understand that. I mean, well, let's just go straight to it. Like Dame, you mentioned them as one of your losers. You kind of got them out the way. Do you want to add on anything to that and then give us your second loser or what's up?
I basically said all I need to say about them is just their first round pick is why I had them as a loser. Like I like the rest of the draft, but just the quarterback position is so important that I had to put them as a loser for really messing that up.
Right.
So as my second loser, I'm gonna have the Colts. Reason being is because they just obviously traded for Carson Wentz. Their left tackle Anthony Costanzo retired, and so you have no left tackle. So I thought they were gonna address that in the first couple rounds. They didn't. They went all D line. I thought their wide receiver group is honestly one of the worst in the league. They have Michael Pittman, who's good. He's a nice ascending star. T.Y. Hilton is obviously not the player he used to be. He honestly had a really bad season last year. Maybe he'll turn around, maybe he won't. But besides those two, I don't really see what they have any certain thing. Like Michael Pittman got hurt a lot last year too, so can you really trust him? They had Rashad Bateman sitting there in the first round for them. They had a lot of tackles sitting for them in the first and second round, and yet they just doubled up on defensive line, which for them is already pretty stacked. So that's the reason why I have the Colts as a loser is because they didn't help out their investment that they traded for this offseason. Carson Wentz.
Yeah, no, you could definitely see that, especially with left tackle being a concern. One of the downfalls in Carson was lack of protection and lack of receiving in Philly, and ultimately, like I think the Colts' offensive line is good enough to the point where they can maybe make up for it.
No,
Maybe Braden
100% is,
Smith,
yeah.
yeah, like maybe Braden Smith could move over to left tackle, but I definitely understand like what you're saying on that, and like you could have maybe hit one of those things earlier. While I do like Kwity Paye, ultimately, like there's definitely an argument to where it's like it's not that you hate the player that they got in the first round.
Oh,
You
no, not
think
at all.
it could have been the other way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely see your point there for sure. Chris, do you want to give us your two losers or do you want me to go?
So I think my first loser is the Detroit Lions. They didn't necessarily make a bad pick with Panay Sewell, but I don't know. I think I just would have gone Jaron Goff a weapon. I think I might have gone Devontae Smith. Some people might have think that would have been too soon, but I think with the absence of Kenny Galladay, I think it would have been a suitable selection for them. And the rest of their draft, I think they had a bunch of picks, and it was predominantly defense. And I think they got just one wide receiver in the fourth round, maybe. I'm not sure. But yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't know what the Lions are necessarily doing, but I just feel like they went a certain route here. And again, you didn't really. Like, Panay Sewell's going to be a historically good offensive tackle, but I just think with your new quarterback, and like the departure of a lot of offensive weapons, and you don't really kind of address those in the later rounds of the draft either. I think it was an L for them. So that's my first loser.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I find that interesting because at least myself personally, I at least with their first two picks, maybe not a full winner, but I got to give them a little bit credit with their first two picks. You pick up Sewell, who was I think they just won best player available at that point on the board with him, and whoever the future quarterback will be there, like they have their blindside blocker for the rest of their career set essentially with him. And then in the second round, they got Levi on Wuzu Rike, the defensive tackle, and a lot of people saying he could be the second best D tackle in the draft class behind Christian Barmore. So at least maybe myself personally, at least the first two picks I liked. I can understand the skill position point, but I just think like Detroit is just going to be a tire fire on that end anyways. Like I don't know if one receiver would have helped Goff, but I could definitely see your point there. Dame, anything, or shall we move on to number two loser for Chris?
It's like they're like in the middle for me. Like I honestly would have won receiver with the first round pick as well. To really give Jared Goff weapons to see what he's at because I don't think their offensive line is that bad. They just signed their center to the high to make him the highest paid center in the league. They have Taylor Decker on the offensive line. Like I didn't think that was really a missing piece for them. I thought that wide receiver group is the worst in the league after losing Marvin Jones and Kenny Galladay. So I think Devontae Smith would have been the perfect pick for them. But you really can't argue against Penei Sewell. Like any team could have used him.
Yeah, that was exactly my thoughts. And I think for my second loser, not necessarily that they had a bad draft, but just because circumstances alone prevented them from going from their ideal picks. I'm gonna go with the Dallas Cowboys as my second loser. Sorry,
Ooh,
Gallo, but I
Gal, he's
think
coming at you, bro.
Surtain and Horn literally got picked like right before. I mean, I know the Eagles and the Bears were before the Cowboys, but they weren't gonna go cornerback. I feel like literally both targets of the Cowboys got picked back to back. And I think Micah Parsons obviously is a elite linebacker, of course. He's one of the best defensive players in this draft, but I'm just saying, so it's not a bad consolation prize by any means. I'm just saying for the reason alone is that their two top targets just went out of their reach, before they could pick. So that's why. I mean, they adjust the cornerback position. I think they went the same route as the Jets, where they just got like a bunch, two or three. I'm not sure. Yeah, it was predominantly defense this draft, and then I think they got an offensive tackle and Josh Ball maybe, and then I think another wide receiver. I'm not necessarily sure his name, but I just think that because the two guys they were eyeing went, that was kind of an L for them. But I mean, other than that, because they kind of also addressed their other needs, it's not a complete L, but in my opinion, it's an L enough to be a loser on my list. Jurg?
Really interesting. You could definitely say that because obviously they end up not getting the player they wanted and going with Parsons just because he's the next best defensive player. And I think the first corner that they drafted, like he wasn't the highest rated corner available.
Yeah, it was a reach apparently.
Yeah, so there's that. I mean, I will say this: they did get one of the steals in the draft, in my opinion, with Jabril Cox. Like Jabril
Oh
Cox is
my
a guy a
God,
lot of
yeah,
people have been high on.
that
Yeah,
was a great pick. Great pick.
so at least on that end, like you could say, like they could recoup a little bit from this draft, adding him. Like he'll be an off-ball linebacker potentially, while Micah Parsons helps in the middle. Because they didn't pick up the fifth-year option on Leighton Vander Esch, interestingly enough. So either him or Jalen Smith is gone after this season. So maybe that was like a, thinking ahead of the game move by Jerry Jones, which, considering how he's been in drafts past, probably a smart thing. But yeah, that's definitely interesting. Like, I'm not necessarily going to disagree. Like, I could definitely see what you're saying. Like, because damn, I think you agree. Even aside from the Jabril Cox pick, like, not a lot of picks to like from what the Cowboys did.
No, not at all. I wasn't as against them drafting Michael Parsons as my boy Gallo was, because I do think he was the best defensive player in this draft. It just wasn't the Cowboys' need, an outside linebacker like that. They really need that corner, but it's not their fault. Like the cornerbacks got taken before them, so I wouldn't count them as a loser because it wasn't their fault. Well, not completely their fault, but like I really like Michael Parsons. I think he'd be the defensive rookie of the year this year. Um, and obviously the Jabril Cox pick, I think, was an absolute steal this late in the draft. But yeah, to me, it wasn't their fault that they didn't get the corners because they were taken right before them.
Right, and
That's life.
sometimes, yeah, to your point, Chris. Like, ultimately, that's how it goes sometimes. So, moving on to me and my losers really fast. Honorable mention: Green Bay Packers, just because you're probably going to lose Aaron Rodgers. So we got to put him in at least in an honorable mention. But I'm gonna go with the Pittsburgh Steelers as my first loser. Like, funny enough, here's the thing with the Steelers, and kind of similar to why Dame had the Broncos as a loser. I actually like the depth picks the Steelers made, but I didn't like the first three. Like, I like their last three picks more than their first three. So their last three picks in this draft were Quincy Roche out of Miami, Trey Norwood, safety out of Oklahoma, and Presley Harvin III out of Georgia. I like the picks of Roche, Norwood, and Harvin. Harvin III, of course, I'm a special teams guy for the brand, and he was the best punter of this draft class, won the Ray Guy Award last year, can absolutely bomb the football, so I think he'll be good. Trey Norwood is a good guy at safety. They lost a lot in the defensive backfield, so maybe he could even start right away. And if a seventh round pick starts for you immediately, like, you could say maybe you lost a lot at whatever position, but you could also argue like, hey, the kid is proving he deserves it. And I think Quincy Roche, 13 and a half sacks in 2019, struggled a little bit in Miami, but I think you saw some good there. And he didn't have Gregory Rousseau next to him to help out. Like, while he had Jalen Phillips, we know Gregory Rousseau, at least in Miami, was a dominant force. So I think he's a solid pick there that they could mold behind TJ Watt and perhaps be a good backup or even start next to Watt one day. And so their first three picks, it's not that I don't like Najee Harris. Again, I love Najee Harris. I think he's a first round talented player. but just the loss of the offensive line this year from left tackle, left guard, and center, all three you lost. And so that moves on to my next pick, the uh, Pat Freiermuth pick for the Steelers. I did not understand at all. There were still very good offensive tackles at that point in the draft. Jalen Mayfield, the guy who went much later than a lot of us would have expected. Again, one of these guys that he would have been a first-round talent player had it not been for the depth at offensive line here. He, for whatever reason, went super late, and I just did not like that. He actually went like about 12 or so picks later, with the Atlanta Falcons. And I think also in the fourth round, like actually, no, I'm thinking of another team. But yeah, I think just ultimately the first two picks did not rub me the right way with the Steelers. It's like you're trying to help out Big Ben, but he's beyond the point of helping out. He's too old for you to just go straight for skill position. I think they should have gone for offensive tackle, at least with their second round pick. I could have forgiven the Najee Harris thing if they would have gotten Jalen Mayfield with their second rounder, but they didn't. And ultimately, like I said, I didn't like their third pick. Like they picked at least an offensive lineman, so I'll give them a little bit of slack. But still, like, who's the center going to be? That's a big question for them. And my second loser, real quick, are the New Orleans Saints. Very limited amount of picks that they had to work with. And it's not that I don't like their picks. It's just, they were the team that ultimately, Peyton Turner was a super late riser in the draft. Like, what was it not the day of or the day before that? Like, that was the first time I heard about him in terms of like, he could have been in the first round. And ultimately, they pick him at 28th overall. This is just because their previous pick of Marcus Davenport hasn't worked out. So that's why they went with him. And then I think in the second and third round, like Pete Werner out of Ohio State and Paulson Adebo, like they could be decent, but it's not wow factor. Like I don't want to disrespect the picks. It's just I'm saying they could be fine, but lack of picks hurts you. And then this is my big thing. Why the hell did you draft a quarterback in the fourth round when you already have Jameis and Taysom Hill? Come on. Like, seriously? And by the way, tight end, a position this team needs. A couple picks later, the Houston Texans actually went with Brevin Jordan. And that's actually one of my steals of this draft because I actually think Brevin Jordan could be really good. He's a physically gifted tight end who I think if he was healthier in his career in college would have been the second tight end of this draft class behind Pitts. So ultimately, I love that Brevin Jordan pick for Houston. New Orleans could have gotten him, and they didn't pick a receiver until their 6th or 7th round pick, whichever it was. Like that, you pick a quarterback for no reason, and then you don't draft a single skill position player until super late in the draft. Like that was just bad for me. So that's why I have the Saints as one of my losers. But yeah, that's how I see it.
All right, and that I think puts a cap on our NFL draft analysis. I think for the year because we already did a mock. I'm done. I'm done with NFL draft prospects, man. I'm fried at this point.
You mean we're not gonna do an early 2022 like they do at ESPN?
It depends on how the Jets perform at the beginning of the season. But if they perform well, that means no Dame Sports mock drafts on WordPress either. So, but yeah, that will be it for this week. Stacked week, very stacked week, very very bomb analysis from the boys as always. And hopefully Aaron Rodgers gets traded next week so we could talk about it and then, cap off that, clickbait title. So, yeah, Jurg Dame, awesome as always. And to all our listeners, thanks. This episode is longer than it should have been, but it's all good. And until next time, all good. Until next time, peace.
Take care.